Hi, folks. My name is John Sadowski from Metro Valley Advertising. Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Personal Injury Marketing Newsletter. Today, we're speaking with Michael Coopersmith from ITS NYC. They're an information technology company that does a lot of work with law firms and in particular with personal injury firms. So, Michael, why don't you please say hello to our audience and tell us a little bit about your company?
Hi, I'm Michael Coopersmith. I'm president of Integrated Technology Systems. We know ourselves as ITS NYC, basically for short. I've been in the IT space since the mid-90s. We started working in the personal injury space in 1998, all the way back then. We've seen the industry change. We've seen it grow. We've seen a lot of integration of a lot of technology. We're based in the New York tri-state area. We worked with a lot of firms over the years. And basically, we're here. Our business is to support their infrastructure and make them productive and keep them safe.
Gotcha. So with all these advances in technology, Michael, you referenced that you're here in the New York Metro. Is it necessary that your clients are also in the New York Metro?
Not at all. We have clients all over the country. We have
Hmm.
clients in California. We have clients that have no physical office. We have clients that have offices right down the street. You know, if you're a client that has a law firm and you need physical presence and you're not near, we make sure we have a partnership where we can get people in there if there's a physical issue and deal with that. And we handle all the remote pieces for those clients as well.
Gotcha. So what are some of the unique challenges, IT challenges that are faced by law firms these days?
I think for every law firm, when we look at it is they got case management software that they want to be productive with. They want to be on leading edge on the marketing tool sets that they're working with and those pieces. There's cybersecurity and keeping up with the regulations. Each state right now has their own different set of regulations that come through at the moment. And we want to make sure that they the firms are in compliance with those regulations. So you have New York State has the New York State Shields Act. California has its own act, which is very similar to GPDR. And basically, if a law firm is representing somebody in the state, they have to be compliant with the rules of that state.
Got it. So how do you keep up with all of that?
It's a never-ending challenge. It's a journey. It's not an end game. So we just continually evolve and we continually build a roadmap and we continually work with them. So we basically look at the most restrictive rules along the way and we manage and map to those rules. And we work with the firms and we engage with them and we have conversations around the human element of it, right? It's really when you look at all this, it's really the human element. We had an issue come up yesterday with a client having security issue, law firm, and it came down to the fact of the person recognizing something happened. You can have all the security in place. A lot of people have what they call multi-factor authentication. It's the thing that drives a lot of people crazy where they have to approve it on their phone or they get the text message, they have to approve it. Well, occasionally somebody gets their credentials and then they still approve that, and all of a sudden we've got a situation on our hands. And when the criminals, if you think about it today, have to be right once, we have to be right, or the firm has to be right 100% of the time. So the human element and the training really are the key to all this. We put a lot of tools in place to prevent ransomware. We put a lot of tools to prevent hacking. We put a lot of tools to prevent pieces. But really, getting your staff and having the relationship with them and having what we call a security culture is one of the most important pieces.
Gotcha. So what are some of the more common cybersecurity challenges faced by personal injury attorneys these days?
Well, you got medical records, right? So making sure you keep those secure, understanding the security of that, understanding that you can't send a medical record unencrypted at the moment. So what that means is if you've got a counsel or you got an expert witness working on that, you know, you're as responsible when you hand them that medical record, you're still responsible for that medical record, even if they're compromised at that point.
Right.
Um, so it's really awareness and understanding the data, right? And protecting that data. And also, we can talk about what's the application you're using and how secure that application comes down to as well.
So what are some of the cybersecurity items firms should be aware of? You mentioned ransomware earlier. It's one that certainly we hear about in the news. Can you explain that a little more to the audience?
Yeah, so ransomware use has changed significantly over the last few years. It used to be when we first got ransomware, it would be okay. Somebody's computer get hit, get through all the security controls, and basically the bad guys would encrypt the data and send you and say, okay, we want 3,000, we want 30,000, whatever money was, and you either, if you had good backups, you could say, oh, you know what? We don't need you. We're going to restore the backups. Great. And we're in good shape and we can go back to it. Today, what a lot of the times is the ransomware change where they're holding now your data hostage. So they've exfiltrated the data out of your environment. Basically, what happens is they take your data at this point, and they've got your
Hmm.
data ransomware, and they're saying, hey, if you don't pay us, we're going to release the data you have, whether it's personal information, medical records, or whatever else, out into the wild. So now you've got liability on your hands because all of a sudden you're releasing medical records, personal information, and everything else. So now it becomes a whole different game than it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Huh. Interesting. You mentioned the human element and training. What does that look like? How do you help firms with that component?
So it's the hardest component and the easiest component. So a lot of we do it, we send out as part of our package with all our stuff, we send out the videos that everybody has to go through and go through the cyber training. And it's interesting. We go through those. It's part of the protocol, and everybody's gone through those for human resources and everything else. And you know what? We do it as obligatory. And the interesting part, what we see is the firms where we come in and we buy lunch or we do stuff or we do a webinar like this or we do something on Zoom and we actually have conversations with them, we see a lot lower incidence of issues because we can discuss it. We can discuss, okay, if you get an email in and it's got the partner's name on it and it says, hey, go buy a bunch of Amazon cards. That is never going to be the case. Stop. Don't work. Check it. Call the partner on a cell phone. You'd rather get the partner upset at you because you've called him and asked him maybe what seemed to you like a stupid question. And he's like, no, I didn't do that. But when you look at the email address, it came from abc@gmail.com and the display name was the partner's name. And so training takes, you have to pick up, hey, name looks right, the email address doesn't, the request doesn't, right? So those are some of the things that come down to wire transfers. We all have to deal with wire transfers or transferring of money. What happens when our side's protected and all of a sudden we receive a wire transfer notice on a piece and then we turn around and somebody else has changed the request of the wire transfer? What is our protocol? What's our procedure? Where do we stop? What do we look at? And so those are where I say the human element is because I can control our side of our client, but I can't control the other side. So awareness in the business world of the process and what's happening is so key today.
Yeah. So is email the most common way that these hackers slash thieves infiltrate a law firm?
I would say absolutely. Absolutely. There are ways where they get into other pieces, but email's the most common form, right? They
Gotcha.
send an email, something's approved, somebody else on the other side is compromised, instructions are compromised. 80% of our challenges come through from emails from one party or another.
Right. Okay. That's what I would think. Yeah. Now, there was another concept you introduced me to, which is the concept of the endpoint. Can you explain what endpoints are and why that is something that firms need to be aware of?
So everybody thinks, in the traditional IT world, hey, I've got a server, I've got my firewall, that's protected, right? Well, today we live in a distributed world. I've got my laptop here. John, you and I were talking. I was in the airport in LaGuardia working the American Express Lounge. Then I was working in Florida while I was picking up my son. That's my endpoint. So I'm on the Wi-Fi in the American Express Lounge. Now I put a encrypted VPN on there, and I'm working in the Marriott in the lounge, and my computer's got access to all the data. So I'm outside the firewall. I'm outside the perimeter. If my computer, just using me as an example, is compromised, they got access to the data. Now, also, what happens if I lost my computer and what data is on the computer? And my computer, using me as the example, is encrypted. So the hard drive on the machine is encrypted. I don't have the password sitting on a post-it note on the computer. So if my computer's lost, it stinks, right? It's a $2,000 MacBook Air. Stinks, I've lost the computer, but my data isn't gone. And nobody can access my data. What most people don't realize is if the data is not encrypted on the computer, and even if I have a password, all somebody has to do is open the computer up and take the hard drive out of the computer, and they can plug it in someplace else, and they can get access to the data. If the hard drive's encrypted, there's nothing except for the loss of the machine. So the endpoint becomes the entry point from ransomware. The endpoint becomes the entry, the point where somebody for email. Basically, it's the machine that is between the human and basically the data and the keyboard.
People working remotely, do you allow your clients to use home computers? And if so, what kind of protections can be put in place
It's
there?
it's a challenge. Home computers are a challenge. So we allow clients, we make them aware of the risk because some clients it's not practical for them to provide home computer for everybody, but we don't allow clients. Our suggestion, we can't say we don't allow, but our suggestion to clients is not to allow any applications or any software to be installed on the home computers. Basically, anything that we do from the home computer front is generally remote access. They use their computer to remotely log into a environment into the cloud where they can't download data, or they log into their desktop in the office where they can't download data. Basically, they're taking remote control of a device in the cloud. But basically, you know, home, home computers are things that the firm doesn't have control over. We don't have control over. And all of a sudden, it's an entry point. And one of the most hardest parts of this is if an incident were to happen with your employee's home computer, it may not be covered by your cyber insurance.
So there's a lot to be said for either providing your employees with a machine that you can control as opposed to allowing them to use whatever they feel comfortable with.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. So a little investment up front and could be a big savings on the back end.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. So now, we know that a lot of apps are moving to the cloud. So what are the tips and things you think a firm should look at if they're looking for new case management software?
I think they all need to be extremely careful. You know, a lot of people jump without asking a lot of questions. We're working right now, and we've got probably about a 40-point questionnaire that we're working on to kind of give you an idea on this. So when you look at it, it's like, why you're changing, what are you going from, what are you going to? What are the productivity gains you're going to gain? What are the productivity things you're going to take a hit, right? So we have firms that look at stuff and they jump in it all of a sudden. It's like, hey, we had a key report that the partners used every week or every month. We can't get that report out of the new software. And so that report that was taking 10 minutes is now taking a associate 3 hours to create manually. Or they go ahead and they didn't realize that they're going to need a third party to migrate the data from one software to another. Or the cloud application all of a sudden has full access to all your data in Office 365. So meaning they have full access to your emails, they have full access to your data in SharePoint. It may mean, so none of these are showstoppers, it's just knowing that information. Then the other side of the coin is, we talked about home computers. What restrictions can we put on users in running that software on their home computers? This is a cloud-based. Okay, that's great. But what if they can download the files, or what if they can install an application that has no restrictions on it? And basically, now you've got a savvy person who's somewhat IT savvy, goes to the cloud, runs the application, starts downloading the data. So there's two where, if everything's going right, there's no big issue with it, right? Two issues. You got a rogue employee who's leaving. You don't know what they've taken, what they've done. Or
Yep.
worse, we've had a security incident now, and the security incidents happen through the home machine. Now you can handle this as long as the conversation comes up. We dealt with a firm about this, and we've said we don't have the controls. So we worked with them and we wrote a policy, a written policy that basically said to the employees, you are not allowed to install the software on your home computer, not allowed to access it without using on a firm computer. These are the controls and these are the pieces in place. So we couldn't put technical controls around it, but we put administrative, we put policy in place to say, hey, can't access this data from home. You may be able to, but now it's in violation of your employment agreement with us.
Assuming that's one of the components now, since so many folks are working remotely and firms like to make that available. Is that what else should a firm be thinking about in terms of maintaining security and efficiency when people start working remotely?
I think you got to be very clear. If you're gonna allow a home computer, is that a person's dedicated home computer, or is that the family's home computer sitting in the middle of the living room, right?
Yeah,
And so that changes the whole paradigm of risk, right?
right.
If it's my home computer, okay, I can know what's on it, I know what's dealing with, and we can write a document. So we a lot of times we make the suggestion to firms saying, if you're going to use a home computer, have the employees say, okay, this is the requirement. You are required to keep security updates up on the computer. You're required to have the latest supported operating system. So that means Windows 10 or Windows 11 if you're running Windows, and certain version of Mac if you're running a Mac. And those things have to be up to date. It shouldn't be a shared family computer. Passwords should be up to date. Security update. These are your responsibilities if you want to be able to work from home and we allow you to use a home computer. So it becomes everything in security is a shared responsibility. We as the IT provider are helping guide the firm. The firm in turn is really responsible for their own security. We help guide them, but They have to enact and own those policies, and then they have to own those policies back with their employees.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you mentioned administrative. There really is a large administrative component here that has to be in place in order to maintain your cybersecurity.
Correct. It's all about culture,
Right.
right?
Where do you guys stand on some of these password encryption services like a LastPass?
So we were using LastPass. I don't want to get into the whole thing. We switched to
Right.
Keeper at this time. We use Keeper. We're in the process of offering it as a service to our existing clients. We rolled it out for ourselves. I'm a I'm mixed on them, and
Hmm.
I'll tell you, I think they're necessary, but I think they're too hard to use at the moment.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay.
And I think they're necessary because you need unique passwords. But like I go to some, I go to 80% of the websites they fill in, and then you go to some website where the password piece it doesn't fill in, and you got to understand how to click on the web extender and basically copy the password and fill it in. You have to make sure. Two
Yeah.
key components, though, if you're going to use password protection. Number one, you have to have it like a 20-character password
Hmm.
on for your master password. Number two, you have to have multi-factor authentication. And
Hmm.
number three is don't share the account with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So if you're gonna have, we have in our family, I use Keeper in the business and I have Keeper personally.
Hmm.
So on my personal side, we have a family account. My wife has one, my son and both my sons and I have one. So like our Netflix account, we created what they call a shared folder, where we shared the account inside there to each one of their accounts so that they can log into the Netflix account, just using an example. There, so there are sharing functions in these programs that you can use, but don't share your account out.
Gotcha. Super. Okay. Very helpful. So obviously we everyone's talking about AI these days. How is AI impacting the IT and cybersecurity field?
It's starting to, you're starting to see pieces come about on the IT side. We're implementing pieces right now where we're going to be able to start looking at help desk tickets and other pieces and being able to get information and to help reduce support time and basically give answers to our technicians. On the cybersecurity side, it's already working in the background on looking at anomalies and looking at pieces that
Hmm.
there and helping the human eye along the way of, you know, how do you get impossible travel, right? I log in from New York now, in 10 minutes I log in from India, and then I log in from Australia, right? AI can kind of say, hey, that's impossible travel. There's a problem here.
Yeah.
So it's really coming about. I think it's even, the PI industry is really even starting to look at it from a marketing aspect. I've been hearing a little bit about. They're looking at everything from an intake form to how how you can create efficiency. It's going to change jobs. It's going to be part of the it's part of the new IT revolution that's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Yeah, and the marketing component does too. I think it's a buzzword now that everybody responds to, and I can imagine in your world it's the same thing.
It is. It's interesting. We're going slower than we used to with these things because it's like, how do we build the process? How do we keep it safe? On the same breath, it's like, that policy that I told you I needed to write, we wrote for that client about home use. I'm like, okay, I can't find one. I can't find one. I went to ChatGPT and I'm like, okay, write me a policy for home computer use limiting stuff for a law firm. It wasn't perfect, but as we know, you're right, it gave me a great 85% starting point. So I had a document now that was 85% of where I wanted to be. Took me probably half hour, 45 minutes to clean it up and make it what I want it to be. But if originating a document for me is 90% of the challenge versus
Yeah.
having something that I can edit and work from.
Right. think the old expression is it's harder to edit a blank page. So yeah.
I never heard that, but that's exactly, I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, makes sense to me. So, kind of, can you give me some ideas or some case studies or examples of where you guys have, improved IT infrastructure and cybersecurity for the benefit of a personal injury law firm?
So, we've been doing IT for personal injury for a long time. So we have, like, we did one from 2019. We didn't know COVID was coming. They had all their servers in their office. They had everything in basically downtown. And we said, okay, we're replacing the equipment. We're moving it to the cloud. They said, okay, let's move it to the cloud. We'll move it to the cloud. We don't want to go with a application in the cloud, but we want to own the application. I said, okay, we can move it still into a cloud you own. We moved it up. We got it all set. They were like real at the forefront to this. And we did that, finished that up beginning of December 2019. And then March 2020, COVID came around. And so we're busy dealing with a whole bunch of clients transition. We call them up and they're like, yeah, you guys called. You set up the remote tool on our home computers so that we could access the data safely. We're all set. Thank you very much. 15 minutes, we were all set. They were working. There was no transition for them for
Hmm.
COVID whatsoever. Basically, they had no issues. They had built-in disaster recovery around the whole thing. So they just worked without a blip, and so we've had that. We've put in a whole bunch of for clients now that are moving much more to the cloud. We've decentralized the servers, put them all on laptops or desktops, put all the security profiles around it, and ask the proper questions to software companies. We're in the middle of implementing right now a firm that's going from a legacy case management to a cloud piece and putting all the cloud controls in place right now to make sure they can work securely from anywhere, any place, anytime.
Super. Great. So are there anything else, any other tips and thoughts that you think that our audience should understand about IT and cybersecurity?
It's a journey, it's not an end. It's We're never going to finish it, right? The bad guys are sophisticated. They're out there. They work hard at it. They're smart people. I'm not going to, and they're persistent, and it costs them cents on the dollar to continue to do this, and the return is big for them. So if you don't have your security where you want it to be, you don't have to knee jerk. You have to put a plan together and make sure you're there. But one of the things I always say, especially if you're the signer and the other stuff, your personal hygiene in your IT stuff is just as important as your firm's. So if you've got a Gmail account and you've got an Outlook account and you've got other stuff, that's because if you're partner level, your business and your personal stuff, make sure all those accounts are secure with multi-factor authentication. Make sure your social media is locked down. Make sure your Amazon account's locked down. Really look at how you interact in the cyber world with your technology. Because how you interact on your personal level is how you're going to interact on your business level is how it's all going to come to be. So the worst thing would be to find out is I've got everything locked down on my work world, but my Gmail account is not. I log into that and I allow something in, or bunch of my clients are also my personal friends, and I got them on my Gmail account, and my Gmail account is compromised, or my Facebook account is compromised, and now stuff that that hurts goes out there. I had tell you my own little situation. It wasn't compromised. I had somebody on Facebook friend me that looked like somebody I knew from my industry, said they worked at Microsoft, said a whole bunch of other stuff. I accepted the friendship. And then all of a sudden, they started putting inappropriate pictures up and friending me, saying I was with them in these things. It was like 3 days, and all of a sudden, my mother-in-law calls me and says, "What are all these pictures?" And I'm like, And I'm like, oh my God, I accepted this friend from somebody who they had some mutual connections. And when I went and looked at my own post, I'm like, and so I unfriended them. I put a post out saying, I'm really sorry. I This was not intentional. If you're offended, I apologize. This is what happened. So it's going to happen all the way along the line. Our personal, our business and our reputation are all we have in the world. And I think that's what we got to protect.
Yeah. Yep. And so cybersecurity is one of those areas that helps us protect that image and reputation.
Correct. And it can get hurt
Stuff.
really quickly if we don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You know, and obviously for attorneys, trust is critical.
Yes, absolutely.
So super. Michael, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And look forward to continuing our conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you again. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll happily answer any questions along the way. Just ping me along the way. It's okay. I can give my contact info. Um,
Yeah, please do. And then I'm going to put an end card up afterwards. So go right ahead, please.
okay. Michael Coopersmith, Integrated Technology Systems. My email is mcoopersmith@itsnyc.com. John will put it up. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer anything, give you any suggestions, personal or business or anything else along the way. If I can't answer it, I'll absolutely have somebody on my team answer for you.
Super. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.